Y'all ready? All right, good morning, everybody. It's 9:06, and I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We have a quorum of 6 present. I'm going to jump forward onto the regular agenda under subdivision plats, item D, RP 2308, Acevedo subdivision. A request for approval of a final plat of Acevedo subdivision being 21.517 acres of land out of the V. Muller survey, number 176, abstract number 1648, described and recorded in instrument number 201715723, official public records, Tom Green County, Texas. There's been a request for this item to be continued to next month's meeting. So I'm going to take a motion from someone, if you would, to continue it.
And that motion would need to include that you're approving a 30-day waiver of the state law requirement that plats be decided upon within 30 days. And I believe that's the applicant's request.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have the applicant come forward and just make the request, please?
Sure, we request, hopefully I get this right. I'm Jack Downey from SKG Engineering. Thank you for hearing our request. But we requested you give us a 30-day extension so that we can get some of the moving parts nailed down on this
Yes,
thing and get it all worked out and
Okay.
present it next month.
Thank you, Jack. Okay. So we have a request from the applicant to continue this. Anyone wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request of, and sorry, I can't remember the exact verbiage you used, but to approve the request for the 30-day I can't talk, so yes.
I think saying a 30-day extension
Okay.
works. Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue the item. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. All right. Now we're going to jump back to the consent agenda. The commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by staff with no opposition received to date. Since some items on the consent agenda may require a public hearing, the commission will accept public comment on any item on the consent agenda in one public hearing. I have a request to pull item A, the consideration of the minutes from last month's meeting. And also item 6, FP 2307, Williams Edition, Section 2, to be moved to the regular agenda. Anyone else wish to pull items from the consent agenda? All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve without the minutes and item 6, FP 2307 Williams Edition. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. So let's go to the minutes first. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. I need to open up public comment for the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to speak on any of the consent agenda items? Please come forward. Okay, I'm going to close public comment. Oh, yes, sir.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. You're just approving the agendas?
Do you mind coming up to the podium? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just want to make sure that I don't miss the item for the Bentwood thing that we talked about last meeting.
No,
It
that's
is not on the
later.
consent agenda.
Yeah, that's later
Okay,
in the
that's what I
agenda.
just-
Thank you, sir. Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Now I'm going to take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as requested.
All right.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve without the minutes and without item 6, FP 2307 Williams edition. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Now the minutes.
So in looking at the minutes that were sent out to the board, there's a number of errors. I mean, first of all, it lists Joe Self as vice chair, which I believe I was elected to in January. I'm happy to cede to Joe, but I'm pretty sure that requires a vote of the board. So I think that needs to be corrected. That kind of prompted me to go back and watch some of the video. There is just some general inaccuracies in the motions and seconds. And so I'll just encourage everyone to take good notes while we're in here and review the minutes before. So I don't know what the next step is after that, but.
Can we just set these aside until the next meeting?
Okay.
Have you guys go back and revise?
And if any of you have specific issues and corrections, please feel free to send them to us.
Okay. All right. The other item on the consent agenda that's been pulled is FP 2307 Williams Edition, Section 2. It's a request for approval of Williams Edition, Section 2, being .2570 acres of land out of the James Williams Survey, number 121 and a half, abstract number 5670, described and recorded in instrument number 202117241, official public records of Tom Green County, Texas.
Good morning, Ray Lineberry, planner. This one was requested off of the consent agenda because one of the items, conditions of approval, was for the water and sewer lines to be ran, and they're already in place. So that condition is no longer needed. We do, however, want to make the condition that a fire hydrant is required. That was part of, it was sewer, water, and fire hydrant was part of condition number 2, and it is not, the water and sewer not needed, just the fire hydrant. So that's the reason it was pulled off of the consent, was to make that change on the condition.
Okay, so is this just a plating for a single-family lot to be built on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and water and sewer are already there.
Do you mind pulling up the notes?
The slide is not there.
The notes are not there?
No.
Okay, so
No,
there are 2 notes.
correct. The tax
In-
cert,
Yeah, so prior to plat recordation, provide a copy of the appraisal district certification indicating that there are no delinquent taxes. Item 2, prepare and submit plans for approval illustrating the proposed installation of a water main and required service connections to hydrants, and complete the installation in accordance with the approved version of these plans.
correct.
Alternatively, submit a financial guarantee ensuring the completion of these improvements within an 18-month period.
So the water meter and everything is not needed, it's just the fire hydrant.
Okay, there's also a note, fire hydrants and fire department access may need to be provided depending upon the proposed layout of buildings and should be addressed as part of the site plan review process.
Correct.
Okay. So you're indicating that the water and sewer taps are there,
Correct.
but that there's a hydrant that's now required?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for the staff on this one? All right, thank you, Ray. I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. Thanks for pulling this one and clarifying that. Our one comment, or the staff is still asking for the fire hydrant. We would ask that would kind of be deferred, if you will, to the building permitting phase, because based on our measurements, there's portions of this lot that is within the standard 600-foot hose lay that the fire department and the fire code allows you to do. If you put the house way back to the back, it does reach beyond the 600 feet. So we have that standard note, I think, on there about the fire hydrants in the International Fire Code. So, you know, we'd like to defer at least that, because there's no reason to add a fire hydrant if there's necessarily just a vacant lot. It would really be tied to the house and where the house sits. And we believe, we're not the fire code officials here, that there is the 600-foot hoseway. So would ask that that would be deferred, and happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Russell. Anyone else wish to speak? Good morning.
Morning. Billy Clemens, Fire Marshal. Sorry. Yeah, the 600 feet where the house could be placed may meet the requirement, but if any of the outbuildings or anything else that gets added to the property won't meet that requirement,
Okay.
okay?
Is this typically part of the site plan review process where the applicant submits plans for the site and you guys make an assessment on whether a hydrant would be required or not?
We try to do it during the plating process, before it gets to the site plan, to get it done before they start adding buildings to the site.
Okay.
That way, it's done beforehand, because once we get to the site plan, it could be too late. That's why we do it.
I don't understand how it could be too late. They're required to have a permit in order to add improvements to the site. Is that correct?
Yes, but we're talking residential, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think that's the difference, is on a commercial site plan, that is a standard part of the review, fire hydrants and fires involved in that. On basic residential site plans, those are we try to turn those around very quickly, and so it's not the full review
Sometimes they get
process
missed.
like a commercial is. And so that's not necessarily typical for just a single-family residence.
Okay, so is the request of the city for the hydrant to be installed as a condition of the approval of this plat? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I just don't understand why it can't be deferred.
Anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, I'm going to close public comment. I understand the problem. It seems a little burdensome in my mind if someone's platting a site for development and hasn't put improvements on it to be required to put a fire hydrant in. A hydrant wouldn't be required otherwise. Is that correct?
Well, typically with a plat, I mean, all of the infrastructure is required as part of the platting process. Just like you have to install the water lines, sewer lines, everything else. There are processes where those can be deferred till later in the process, but the trigger, and that's primarily based on the way the state law is worded, the trigger is the platting process itself. The idea is if you are platting a piece of property for development and you sell that to someone else, you're basically telling them this property is ready to be developed. It has water, sewer, fire hydrants, roads, everything else you need. And so that's kind of the kind of philosophy behind why all this is required at the platting stage.
But in the circumstance that Mr. Gully's outlined, improvements could be added to this site without the requirement of a fire hydrant.
I would, and that's a decision that's made by the fire department on whether or not that's a requirement. So I would defer to them on this particular requirement. Is it necessary in this particular case?
I just, as Mr. Gully stated, I mean, if they put the home towards, or whatever structure they're planning on doing towards the front, I don't understand honestly why it can't be deferred to actually a certificate of occupancy stage. I mean, because at that point in time, they know exactly where any structure is going to be on the property.
I just kind of feel sorry for this customer having to foot the bill for a fire hydrant when everybody on that block will use it. Is there another fire hydrant on the block? Or do we know?
No, well,
Down the street, like the next block over? Okay. So that's almost like a infrastructure oversight on city's part, or it should have been done a long time ago, I guess.
Well, and I don't recall the specifics of this situation. We've come across this recently in areas where it was developed outside the city limits, then came into the
Gotcha.
city limits at some
Right.
point.
Yeah. Like
And
that
so-
being Lakeview probably was a long time ago.
Okay.
So what are the options to delay this? Is there a way to delay the installation of the fire department to some later process? I mean, because I know I do a lot of replatting and, you know, it's until we're gonna build or we sell or we do something, we really don't know, you know, what the improvements are gonna be, where they're gonna be, and it makes it more difficult. Because I could put it in the wrong place.
I don't, you're right, we would normally allow this to be deferred, not waived completely, but deferred until, and so they could put it in when they're doing all of the improvements that are part of the construction of the house and all of that.
Yes, sir.
I think, assuming Billy's okay with that, so we're still requiring it, it would just be deferred until they're actually building on the site.
Okay. That would be great. Okay, so we have in the notes that a fire hydrant may need to be provided. Is that sufficient with you, sir? Okay. Does anyone else have thoughts or wish to make a motion?
I move that we accept as presented with deferring the fire hydrant to the building.
To the site plan review process?
Yes.
All
Second.
right. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented with the note on the fire hydrant may be needing to be required, but would be reviewed as part of the site plan review process. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So 6-0. All right. Regular agenda, subdivision plats. The planning commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the city council. FP 2303, Southland Hills Edition, section 28. Request to final plat, the Southland Hills Edition, section 24B, being 2.291 acres out of that certain 37.506 acre tract described and recorded in volume 249, page 258, official public records of real property of Tom Green County, Texas, and located at the intersection of Stone Canyon Trail and Forest Hill Drive.
Good morning again. This is Ray Lineberry, planner, and it is Southland Hills Edition, Section 24B, the final plat of the little flag area in the red there. It is 2.291 acres. It is Stone Canyon Trail and Forest Hill Drive, District 1, Tommy Hubert in the Bonham neighborhood. That's a picture of the plat. I will also remind you that they did get approval for the smaller size lots, which is why they are a little bit small. They're the 45 instead of 50. And we are recommending approval with the 5 conditions. The tax cert is one of them. They continue Forest Hill Drive, and then the installation of water and sewer, and a drainage study. If there's any questions?
All right. Thank you, Ray. Any questions for the staff? So this was part of a multifamily zone site that was rezoned, is that correct?
It was part of, let's see if I can, if you kind of see the lines of
Yes.
this big one right there.
Yep.
It was originally part of the big, it's just a piece of that.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have questions for the staff? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. Would just be happy to answer any questions and thank staff for working through this. And as Ray pointed out, this is just kind of an update and revision to the plat to kind of make the lot size coincide with what the PD approval was. So we'll resubmit. We had submitted design drawings for the water and sewer, so we'll resubmit to engineering, adjusting the water and sewer services to match, and we believe that the drainage study that was submitted for this would still be appropriate. So we'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Russell. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment and take thoughts or a motion.
Move to accept as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Item B, FP 2311, Pecan Grove. Request for approval of a final plat of Pecan Grove Edition, lots 1 and 2, and a variance from Chapter 103A2 of the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance to maintain a paving width of 26 feet with no curb and gutter for Lake Drive, an urban local street.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Sherry Bailey, Senior Planner. As you indicated, this is a request for a final plat for Pecan Grove. The zoning there is actually Ranch and Estate Zoning District, or R&E, so it requires 1 acre minimum lots. In this case, there was 2.5 feet of additional right-of-way that was needed. That came in under an administrative variance, but when the administrative variance was granted, that did make this slightly less than the 1 acre. Just making that you aware that one was granted for that. This is in District 2, Tom Thompson's district, and in the Riverside neighborhood. The variance that is being requested as part of this application is a variance to allow the 26 paving width on the no curb and gutter and no curb and gutter for Lake Drive. Lake Drive at this point is just a local street. It's a small local street. It's at the very end, just before you leave the city. There's a slight jog, as you'll see right here. It normally followed the major road, and then at that point it jogged in and became Lake Drive, an extension of Lake Drive. And with that, a lot of it is already developed out. The existing 26 feet serves the area. Because it is R&E, staff is supporting the variance because it is just a minimal area and a very short area to extend out. So again, staff is recommending approval of Pecan Drive plat and the approval of the variance, and there are 4 conditions, if you will. Number 1 is the plat recordation. We require a copy from Tom Green County on the taxes. Second one is prior to plat recordation, install necessary water and wastewater service lines to the new lot if needed. The third one is prior to plat recordation, submit a revised plat on which is illustrated the correct right-of-way for Lake Drive. On the one that is in your packet, the right-of-way width was incorrect. And number 4 is prior to plat recordation, submit a revised plat on which is illustrated the correct lot numberings or some identification between the 2 lots. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, anyone have questions for the staff? The 26-foot pavement width, I'm assuming that that stretch of road that's visible on this this aerial map that you've shown, that the pavement width is the same?
Yes, it is 26 feet all the way up.
Okay. Any other questions for the staff? I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this? Please state your name and single member district or address.
Good morning, Erica Wilde with Carter Fentress Engineering. I want to thank staff for helping us out on this one, working through it, and we just ask that you approve it as presented. If anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Any questions? Thank you, Erica. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment and take feedback or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. Item C, RP 2305, Hyde Park Edition, first replat in Block 51. Request for approval of a first replat, Hyde Park Edition, being the west 80 feet of lots 1, 2, and 3, and west 70 feet of lots 6, 7, and 8, Block 51, Hyde Park Edition.
Okay, Zach Rainbow, Planning and Development Services. Okay, this is replat 2304, the first replat of Hyde Park, Block 51. They've met all the requirements of the subdivision ordinance, therefore staff is recommending approval. Here's the original plat. As you can see there, indicated by the red lines, that's what they're replatting. It is a portion of lots that used to face east to west, but are now developed, or were developed over time north to south. That plat was done in 1907. This is the notification map. We did receive phone calls, multiple phone calls with concerns about the development. Again, maybe concerns of selling it off, mentions of possibilities of what they're going to do with the properties. Again, it's just to replat to satisfy lenders' requirements. The platting doesn't create the need for any variances. It's pre-existing. It does not create any new property lines. Here's the stipulation in the ordinance. If the lots were configured before 1950, they're allowed to be exempt from including the remainders from our property records. This house existed with the homes and divisions happening in 1946, so it meets that requirement. Again, here's an image of the block. I'll go back to an aerial. Staff is recommending approval with the condition that a tax certificate and also that a note that any selling of the properties or need for a building permit for the properties along the alley here will be areas of concern because it's split up into 3 lots. If you can see here, and so if any of these are sold off, so say if a middle portion is sold, it could create a replatting issue, which then creates the lack of access to a public street. So just a note for the adjacent property owners. But staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So the note that you just alluded to, Zach, is not the subject of this discussion for this case. It's an adjacent property?
Correct. Just to
Could
make
you go back to that aerial?
So the lots
Is there more than one structure with separate ownership
on both lots, yes, sir.
on both lots?
Yes. So
And they have alley access?
well, yes, correct.
Okay.
The clicker's not working, but yes, all So essentially, what has been created is 4 individual lots. Each of those have separate accessory structures, which could have potential, especially ones adjacent that aren't being addressed with this replat for potential issues down the road.
Okay? Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for the staff?
I'll just make one comment here that, as Zach just mentioned, in your staff report, there's a condition number 2, which talks about those adjacent properties. I think that should probably be a note instead of a condition, because the conditions apply to the property being platted. That's just a note for future reference, basically.
Yep. I agree. Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this, please come forward, state your name and address or single member district, please.
Good morning. I'm Karen Best, and I am a property owner within the affected area. And I'm looking at the notice that was sent to all of the affected residents. My property is at 418 South Bishop. And I had the opportunity to visit with the property owner who's working with us, the Weatherfords, and they're fantastic. But we have a concern, and it's not with what she wants to do with her home. I understand what she has on. I'm not a clicker person, so I don't think I can make this work. But if you look in the upper corner, the notice that we received isn't very clear about what's happening here. And so it doesn't really give, and we've got a number of people on this side of the room who are all sitting here going, we're not quite sure what's happening. When we speak to Mrs. Weatherford, we know what's happening, but we can't tell from the wording of what's here. So if you look at the notice, it says, after a request for approval of the replat on 1222 West Avenue D and 1221 Live Oak, it goes down underneath in the paragraph that says, a map and a copy of the proposed replat are attached for your information, first replat, blah, blah, blah. In additions for replatting or in applications for replatting or subdivision of areas zoned or which have been zoned within the last 5 years for a maximum of 2 residential units per lot. And we're not quite sure what that means. I do understand that there is a garage apartment from the home that she's purchased in front that's being absorbed into her property, so that she doesn't have a renter looking down to her backyard. I don't blame her.
Sure.
We have no problem with that. None of us do. But this same group, or the Santa Rita posse around that area, have real concerns in the following block and with what the planning department put forth before this commission last year on that affected lot, which, if you look at the map that they provided, is in yellow.
North.
That 15556 lot. It's a crappy house on the corner of Bishop and Live Oak. That, when it was proposed last year that the entire block containing that corner house be rezoned RS2, and that when we visited with the planning department, we were told, not just myself, but others who visited with the planning department were told that the long-term plan for this area of Santa Rita is for the city to develop high-density, affordable housing in this area. The language on the back of this got our attention, and when it says that it's being that it's allowing for a maximum of 2 residential units per lot, our concern is that in replatting this, we're not opening a door or setting a precedent for rezoning, because we've already replatted this area for multifamily residences. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
That's it, essentially. None of the neighbors have a problem with what the Weatherfords are trying to do. We're grateful to the Weatherfords for what they're doing in improving and trying to protect that neighborhood. And probably nobody has paid more for having bad owners around us than the Weatherfords. And so in support of what they've got 3 properties they've had to worry about. And so in support of them, I think no one minds what they're trying to do. We're more concerned about this language that isn't even on the agenda item. And so we don't want a foothold for RS2 that we're not aware of, that we don't have an opportunity to organize and discuss and debate, and to look at the long-term implications for property owners in that area.
could the staff speak to Ms. Best's question?
Yeah, that's, the short answer is this does not change zoning. This does not allow anything on the property other than single family, which
So
is
the
what
underlying
current
zoning on this lot is RS1.
Yes, and the language in the notice is basically straight from the state law, which basically says, normally plats don't require public notice or public hearing, because it's more of an administrative type of thing, just splitting property. But the state law says if any property is zoned for single family or two family, then we must notify the surrounding property owners for a replat. And so that's all that language means is when it says less than or up to two family allowed on the property, basically means any property that's zoned for single family or duplex has to give notice to those surrounding property owners.
Does that make sense?
It does, and that's what we were looking for here today, was some assurance from the planning department that later, when we go to look at and address, because I assume you're still looking at taking, I mean, maybe you can answer that for all of us. Is it still the planning department's intention that Santa Rita and areas and blocks in these neighborhoods be looked at for future development as RS2?
No, and I'm not sure where that came from, but we, as you probably know, we had looked at, because we had gotten so many requests for RS2, when they really didn't want duplexes, all they wanted was a small accessory apartment. What we had looked at, maybe a year ago, was allowing accessory apartments by right, so that we wouldn't open the door to duplexes, but would allow for people to have an apartment, a garage apartment. As you may know, that this commission has some concerns with that, and so we have not brought anything back. I think I don't want to get too far off this topic, but our intention right now is to bring back something that would still be a discretionary decision, like a rezoning, to this board, rather than opening it up and saying accessory apartments are allowed everywhere, which is kind of what we had proposed before. So that's really off the table at this point.
Good, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this case? If so, please come forward.
Jack Downey with SKG Engineering. The owner of the property, Ms. Weatherford, is here, and
yes, sir.
She's satisfied with what's been said. Her intent is to improve things, not to make the neighborhood any more dysfunctional than it already might be. Her intent is to protect her property and, of course, her neighboring property rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, I'm going to close public comment and take feedback or a motion from my colleagues up here. Anyone else have questions or concerns about what we're looking at? I have in here that item 2, the remaining adjacent properties, which was listed as a condition, has been moved or should be moved to the notes.
To notes. I move that we accept as presented, moving condition number 2 to the notes.
To the notes?
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented, moving condition 2 to notes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. All right, item E, RP 2306, second replat of Poulter's Highland Acres Addition, tracks 36 and 37. A request for approval of a second replat of Poulter's Highland Acres Addition, tracks 36 and 37, and a request for a variance from Chapter 103A1 of the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance to allow a 60-foot right-of-way in lieu of the required 76 feet.
Okay, Zach Rainbow, Planning Development Services. As you said, this is RP 2306, a second replat of the Highland Acres Additions, tracks 36 and 37. It's 1.29 acres in size, zone CGCH. District 2, Tom Thompson. They are requesting a variance to the pavement width of 48 feet in lieu of the 64. When we originally put out the agenda, it was mentioned for 60 just to incorporate all of the above, not knowing what it was. Here's a picture of the improved street, the variance request. Staff is in support of the variance request. Recently, as you can tell, it was resurfaced, if you will, by the city with future plans to improve it. Therefore, at this time, staff is in support of the variance request. Here's a picture of the existing lot with the buildings and structures. They are incorporating a portion of a lot to the north into one lot, replatting in order to construct a new building. Here's the vacant piece of lot. If you're familiar with Busker's Automotive, it's to the north. They're taking a portion of that lot and a lot to the south, combining the two for a new business. Staff recommends approval. They've met all the conditions of the subdivision ordinance, and staff is also recommending approval of the variance with 4 conditions. Identify and indicate the dimensions of the buildings within 10 feet. Submit plans to improve. This note is in there unless the variance is approved. So there's a note that the variance has been requested. Sidewalks are required along Glenna. And then submit plans for sidewalks as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Zach, could you go back to the plat photos? We've got a couple of different pictures here, and I'm unclear on what's there and what's changed.
So I wish I had an aerial. So it's not included. So to the north is Busker's Automotive. It's adjacent to the east-west collector road. I believe it's the freeway. It goes down Glenna. There are 2 lots. There's existing structures. It's a vacant portion of pavement in between. They essentially want to put in a new storage building identical to the ones just south of Busker's.
Okay. All right. Everyone clear on where we're going, what we're doing?
It's the 600 block at Glenna, if that helps.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
There's a fire station to the east, straight down the road. Okay. I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Good morning, Russell with SKG. On the sidewalks, as the aerial has shown, if I can get there, or that photograph, there's paving, if you will, up against and adjacent to it when within the right-of-way. So they would have to go in there and demo that stuff out and then come back with the sidewalk. Our ask would be, and even if there is future plans for kind of updating and improving Glenna, we could put in a sidewalk and the city come in and then widen Glenna, and then they're going to have to tear out this new sidewalk we constructed. So our ask would be maybe to, as we've done in the past, go in there in those cases, and TxDOT's even done it, and you've seen in their segments of where they're doing sidewalks or not doing sidewalks along portions of Knickerbocker and the Bryants, is where there's pavement that's compliant. Handicap accessibility requires it to be a firm, stable surface, and then you have your slope limitations of cross slope and running slope. This area is relatively flat, and we believe that the pavement in and of itself would make a compliant, if you will, handicap accessible route. So our ask would be is some flexibility, if you will, that we can work with staff or engineering to kind of denote or demonstrate that the existing pavement is adequate, if you will, to meet the sidewalk requirements.
Yeah, I think we'd be comfortable with pursuing that, because Russell's right, we've allowed that as is TxDOT in the past. So
Yep.
I think if we could, I don't know if the condition needs to be reworded. That's something we typically would work out through basically the site plan review process. But I think we could revise that to indicate that flexibility.
Okay?
And would be happy to answer any questions.
Anyone else wish to speak on this case, please come forward. State your name, address, or single member district. All right, I'm going to close public comment and take thoughts or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented with a notation that if the existing pavement is adequate for a sidewalk, that that is sufficient in those areas.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented with a revision to note 4 on allowing pavement potentially in lieu of the sidewalk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. PP 2302, Jefferson Heights, Section 11A. Request for approval of a revised preliminary plat of Jefferson Heights, Section 11A, being 1.083 acres of land out of, excuse me, the J. Mole Survey, 191, abstract 1656, City of San Angelo, Tom Green County, Texas, being that certain tract described instrument number 201414920, official public records of Tom Green County, Texas.
Travis, do these need to be
Right.
read together, the two Jefferson Heights?
We would ask that you take the final plat also.
All right, I'm going to also read the next case, FP 2309, Jefferson Heights, Section 11A, request for approval of a final plat of Jefferson Heights, Section 11A, being 1.083 acres of land out of the J. Mole Survey, 191, abstract number 1656, City of San Angelo, Tom Green County, Texas, being certain tract described in instrument number 201414920, official public records, Tom Green County, Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This piece of property has had a number of plans on it. In the past, there's a lot of ideas. The biggest problem with this piece of property is its location. It is where Glenna curves and comes around, and Howard is also a local a street that carries some traffic on it. But in both cases, Glenna and Howard have curb and gutter and have paving out to that curb and gutter. And so when we were looking at this, the applicant asked for a variance on the paving width and the curb and gutter because both are existing. This is a picture on the left of the environment. You can see that the area is built out with mostly homes. The property to the west is the area that is federally owned. It's right next to the dam that exists out there. And the zoning for this one piece of property is R2. The surrounding property is R1. What the applicant is intending on doing is coming up with a unique development for the area, individual properties, if you will, looking at the fact that there will be no access off of Glenna, and they're well aware of that and indicated that on the plat itself, because Glenna is so large and is intended to carry a great deal of weight. In this particular case, for the final plat for the end property, they are going to either enter their garage off of the alley or have a short driveway that comes in off of Howard. But in either case, they are not going to have anything off of Glenna itself. So given that and the fact that the property already has curb and gutter and the entire area has curb and gutter, and pavement out to that curb. Staff is also supporting the variance that they have requested on that additional paving. It makes no sense to jog in at this point and tear down a piece of curb and gutter. And so, staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat and final plat for Jefferson Heights, Section 11A, and approval of the request to grant a variance from the requirement for paving and right-of-way width for both Glen Estate and Howard Street. And we have two conditions of approval, the tax certification, and then a fire hydrant will be required at the time of site plan review, and the applicant is aware of that. And with that, are there any questions?
Anyone have questions for the staff? No. All right, thank you. We're going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please state your name and address or single member district.
Russell with the SKG. I think there again, the fire hydrant, it talks about being required at the time of site plan review, but we would, I guess there again, ask for the opportunity or the ability to submit the site plan and then allow the fire chief or whoever needs to go and measure and make sure that they're within the acceptable lengths for hose lay on those fire hydrants. To add a fire hydrant for a property as an individual, they can be in the $12,000 to $20,000 range. So they for these little infill projects, they really can make or break, if you will. And you hate for them to be that way, but on these infill projects like that, some of these fire hydrants are just kind of right on the fringe of being within the hose lay length of that. So we would, and if you could move the building just a little bit to be compliant, typically they'll do that and take that into consideration. So we just ask this one to be have that same flexibility, if you will, as the other one does on the fire hydrant requirement.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Russell. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment and take thoughts or emotion. Has the manner with which we handle fire hydrants changed in this process? This is the second case we've had today that's come up.
The reason we brought this one forward is this entire area doesn't have many hydrants at all.
Okay.
And so when we measured it out and when fire looked at it as part of their review,
Yes,
it
ma'am.
was evident that there would definitely need to be a fire hydrant.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Aaron Benoit, Assistant Director of Planning and Development. And the challenge is there's really two things that are driving hydrants. One is the subdivision ordinance, which you guys have purview over.
Yes, sir.
The other is the International Fire Code that's the fire department that has control over that. And so
Yes,
there's
sir.
really two competing codes there. So we try to make sure that we notify at the subdivision ordinance, hey, it may look like there's a hydrant being needed at this point. Maybe it's not 100% clear if it is or not until, as like Mr. Gully said, there's a site plan with a hose lay. All right, yes, it is triggered or it's not triggered. And so I
Okay.
think it's more of a language thing, but we are trying to work through that as a development team to make sure that the applicants know this might be a cost or a concern.
Yeah.
And how to deal with it in the future.
And I completely understand that. What I didn't want to do was, without certainly discussing with you guys ahead of time, if we're making a change in policy on how we're handling hydrants, I'd like just to kind of understand why. And
I think we're just having more information being presented. As as you guys noted, sometimes those are conditions and then sometimes they're notes. And I think we're just kind of working through as staff team, when does it need to be a true condition of the plat? And when does it just be a note in the plat saying, hey, this may be for future development?
So in this case, is a note sufficient for the staff?
I believe so, until we know what's being proposed on the lot. I believe that's going to work out.
And you still have all of the adequate measures in place to go through and ensure that if we need a hydrant, one gets put in?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So will that be deferred to a site plan?
Yeah, I think the question here is it a condition or a note? And I think, based on what Aaron's just indicated, a note might be sufficient. If there's a fire hydrant that meets the requirements for the site plan that's submitted, we don't want a condition for approval that says that they have to put a hydrant in if they meet the requirements otherwise, right?
So are we deferring
So we're
the
just gonna
decision
move
on the hydrant to?
move the hydrant to notes instead of a condition.
Okay.
I move that we present are you ready for that?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment in case I haven't already. And now I'll take a motion.
I move that we
Yeah.
approve
I
as
wrote that on you.
presented, moving the hydrant requirement to a note.
Okay.
Yeah.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve as presented, moving the hydrant condition to a note. Do we need to take a motion separately on the preliminary and final plats, or can we do them together?
I think they can be done together.
Okay, so
Both together.
together. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So 6-0 on both, the preliminary and the final. No problem. We're going to take a short break. Take a 3-minute break. It's 10:03. All right, I'm going to resume our meeting, if you guys don't mind taking a seat. We are on to rezonings and comprehensive plan amendments. City Council has final authority for approval of rezonings and amendments to the comprehensive plan. Item A, PD 2302, 2025 East Houston Hart Expressway, a request for approval of a rezoning from the Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District to the Planned Development Zoning District to allow an underlay of heavy commercial for a welding shop, in addition to neighborhood commercial uses located at 2025 East Houston Hart Expressway, being 1.861 acres.
Good morning, Ray Lineberry again. And this is a PD zoning instead of the CG that is on there. And I did make a mistake on the slide. It should be CH, not CG, as the base zoning. You read it correctly. On my slide here, I have CG. So it should be.
This says base zoning CG.
On the agenda, it said CH that you just read?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did I mess up on the
It's
report too?
CH.
It is
It's CH on the
CH.
agenda, it's CG on.
It should be CH.
CH.
Yes. Is going to be the base zoning.
Okay.
And it is located at 2025 Houston Hart. It is, let's see if I can, these two lots right here. And it is in the Pauline neighborhood, District 4, Lucy Gonzalez. 12 notifications were mailed. We received 0 in support, 0 against. This is the site plan, what they plan on doing. If you notice, the storage units are on this side with the residential over here. The welding shop would be over here, so it won't be as loud, bad. I don't know what the correct terminology is. They do have future plans to add more storage, I believe, down here, which is why that lot is included in the PD. The lot is designated as transitional, so we feel that it will promote a transition between residential and commercial. The addition of a commercial and storage unit at this location is a reasonable use, especially right there off the highway and next to residential. So we do feel the PD is compatible with the surrounding area. The storage units on the one side and the welding shop on the other is really the only area of concern, and the welding shop on that side is a good fit. So we don't anticipate any negative environmental effects. As indicated, the comprehensive plan is transitional, so we do feel that this transitions. And the approval of this PD will not change the development patterns. So staff is recommending approval for the rezoning from neighborhood commercial to a PD, and that should be the base zone of heavy commercial. And if there's any questions.
Anyone have questions for the staff? So just to clarify, you guys want heavy commercial underlying zoning for this site, not general commercial?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I open it up for public comment.
Erica Willie, Carter Fentress Engineering. I wanted to note that this property did have a conditional use on it that was approved by Planning Commission a few years ago. It has expired, but the conditional use was almost exactly what they're doing here. It'll be light welding all inside. And I just ask that you approve as presented.
Okay. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. I don't think a heavy commercial zoning is a adequate transitional zoning for this area. You've got homes that are immediately east of this site, is that correct?
West of the side,
They're west.
which is why we put the shop on the east side.
Sorry, yes, west. Okay.
Erica, are they welding in it currently under the conditional use that they, that?
It never got built out.
Is the tract that's labeled 28,922 that is next to this, wasn't that in our last meeting?
Yes, I
And
believe
is-
there was a plat to the south,
Yeah,
south of
subdivision?
the property.
Yeah, isn't that the Crosswinds subdivision?
Yes.
Back a slide, Ray.
Ray, do you mind going back a slide, please? Thank you.
Yeah, isn't that a single-family subdivision?
I
that we just
believe the northern part, and maybe SKG can speak to this, but I believe the northern part is still commercial,
The frontage on the loop is
Right.
commercial.
Yeah.
which is what we have here.
Yeah, that subdivision's closer to that. Down, like,
Okay.
Travis, one option, if that's your concern, we could make the plan development a base of CG instead of CH, but with the additional allowed use of the welding shop as shown on the concept plan. I guess I'd look to Erica to make sure that still actually works.
What,
That wouldn't open it up to all the other CH uses that could possibly be in the future if this doesn't happen.
The only reason why it would have to go CH would be because of the welding, because the storage wouldn't classify under CH.
That's right.
Okay. I personally don't think that a welding shop is an appropriate use in that area.
You do have a lot of other heavier commercial though, like there's.
Isn't that a hospital to the south?
St. John's campus.
Yeah, but like if you go up and over slightly, like you've got like some of the wrecking yards and some other like heavier commercial stuff.
Right, but we've also got a single-family subdivision that's going in immediately to the east. And there's apartments east of that.
If you remember last month on the plat for the big area.
Yes.
Over here, the very top portion of it was going to be commercial.
Yeah, frontage.
Right.
Yeah, on the frontage, if that helps.
But it's general commercial, right?
Correct,
Not heavy.
correct.
Yeah, I don't object to commercial on that frontage. It's the welding aspect, and maybe I'm wrong. I just think that that's, for what is trying to be done in this area, that seems like a really intense use for that tract.
Good morning, we're also with SKG. I don't want to speak for or against the welding side of things. Maybe when the maps get updated, it will show that there's going to be the RS1 or whatever zoning, the residential zoning there to the southern part of that property to the east. So I think that's going to trigger some fencing requirements to separate the two zoning districts for the commercial and then the residential. So there would be that fencing requirement there. Maybe if there is concern for the welding side of things, as Erica said, it would be done inside. I don't know how, as a PD, if you could put some of those, that it needs to be done inside and maybe limit the hours of operation such that they're not in there late in the evening beating around, making a whole lot of noise if there is residential close by. 'Cause I think that would maybe be your only concern, would be that moving and moving iron around, if you will, for a welding shop.
I have several concerns of this use. You'll give me just 1 second. I think that a welding use has exterior storage is inherent with heavy industrial use like this. There are hazardous chemicals that are fire hazard associated with heavy commercial and welding. and we're putting a bunch of self-storage units right next to it, I just don't think that welding on that site is a good use. But please, go ahead, Eric. I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Sure, I just wanted to note that there will be the fencing, and then the property to the south, there will be no welding. It'll be storage units, but we will have the required fencing and landscaping also.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comment. Anyone else want to share their thoughts on this, or?
I tend to agree with you. I'm trying to think of all the other welding shops. I think that does create a whole different pictorial or I guess the way the neighborhood would look with that. I'm okay with the storage units, but I do believe that a welding shop does present a whole different view for the residential customers around there.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think it's too intense for we've just rezoned the property right next to it to be, and just below it, St. John's, right?
Yeah.
I think. And then single family on the other side of that's RS1. I think heavy commercial is not appropriate.
You have you have the apartments right next to it, but you
Yeah,
also
just to
have
the east.
Concho Valley Electric Co-op, who
It's an office.
is a big commercial, no, they've got big trucks, big spools of wire, all kinds of stuff over there. That's the full length of that, or pretty close to it.
All right, anyone else wish to share their thoughts or make a motion?
I'll just add one more note.
Yes, sir.
It sounds like there's a few that are opposed to the welding. I believe it's currently zoned neighborhood commercial, so you could still zone it to general commercial, which would allow the storage units if that's something you were okay with. I'm not sure, does the neighborhood commercial allow that today, or does it need the CG? Yeah. So rather, I guess what I'm suggesting, if that's the direction of the entire commission, rather than completely denying it, you could rezone to CG, which would allow the storage units to move forward, but not the welding.
Are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
I make a motion that we approve as,
Well, we could. Are you okay with that versus a denial?
well,
So we have a motion on the table here to approve.
I was gonna make a motion to approve as a CG with the allowance of the welding shop.
I'm going to second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve with CG zoning.
Well, let me correct that. We can't make conditions on CG, so it would still be a planned development, but with a base zoning of CG instead of CH.
Okay.
But then the additional welding. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the planned development zoning with underlying general commercial zoning that would allow a welding shop. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Aye.
Could we actually do that again with a show of hands, just to make sure we get the count right?
So we have 2 in favor and 4 opposed? So that did not carry.
Can we
Yeah, we could have I'm sorry, Trinidad, we could
can
have
we make a
another
motion
motion.
to approve as a CG without the welding shop?
But it's,
Or just a CG across the board?
but if they can't do the welding, does her client want the zone changed at all, I think is the question at that point. Because I'm assuming they want to have it changed specifically for the welding.
Would they want to move forward with the CG without the welding shop? Okay,
Then we'll,
so we'll just let it be brought back, I guess, or should. It's out there.
Yeah, I'll just point out, there's really nothing that they can't do with the change in zoning to CG versus CN. CN's much more restrictive, so it really doesn't harm the property owner to have the CG versus CN.
Okay.
Okay? Anyone want to make a motion?
So I'll make a motion to change the classification to CG without the welding.
Okay? So this is a motion to straight rezone to general commercial. Does anyone want to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to rezone to CG. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? 6-0. All right. Next one is PD 0203 amendment, northeast intersection of Stratford and Melrose. Request to amend the existing conditions of Plan Development 0203 located at northwest of the intersection of Melrose and Stratford Avenues adjacent to the Bluffs Limited.
As you indicated, Mr. Chairman, this is a request to amend the original PD, which is 0203, but essentially do a new PD, which will be PD 2303. This is the property that is immediately adjacent on kind of the northwest side to the Creek 28 residential development. When the Creek, or 27, when the Creek 27 was rezoned, its PD was rezoned, it inadvertently included this property. So that's why we are having to bring it back to you as its own PD, because the underlying on the property at the present time is RS3. And that doesn't make sense from a future land use for that area, since it's immediately adjacent to a Houston Heart. And so the applicant is asking, in this case, to rezone from the RM1 PD zoning that was done a couple of years back to the new PD 2303, which would allow a base zoning of general commercial, but also allow for some small flexibility in that district, and I'll go over that in a minute. But this is a picture of the property, and you can see Creek 27, which is above it. That development is in effect right now. This is in SMD 6, Larry Miller's area, and it is part of the Bluffs neighborhood and contains 9.088 acres. We did send out notifications to the surrounding property owners. We sent out 9. No one responded, either for or against. In looking at this, the applicant wants to do storage units in the back lot, but in the front lot, let me go back for just a moment. And along what is Melrose, the applicant wants to do a general, or sell the area for a general commercial development, kind of a strip mall or a service type of commercial for that entire area. The large area has single-family homes. It has the multiple family rental home area. There is some multifamily that's not very far away, and there's not a lot of service commercial in that area, and that's what he's looking at, again, with the storage units to the rear. And so staff looked at it, and from that kind of use and what is intended, the CZ zoning actually acts as a buffer to the adjoining residential and is a good transition into that residential area. We also looked at the effects, and we believe that it will have a positive effect, though the commercial generally generates a lot of traffic. Melrose is built to accommodate that traffic. The commercial or the storage units in the rear can service the area. But it's not a highly trafficked use, and so won't generate a lot of additional traffic. We believe that this development meets the identified needs in the area, and that the development patterns in that area are pretty well established, and so these developments will work right in to that. Staff is recommending approval of the amendment, but I would like to go over and read to you what we've got down on there. So we're recommending the amendment to the original PD by creating PD 2303 with an underlying general commercial zoning that allows the inclusion and requires the present applicant to rezone to accomplish what he hopes to do, which is storage units in that back part of Lot 1 in Section 2, Hardin addition, with a commercial development, yes, to be determined on that front parcel. We are requiring landscaping along Houston Hart Expressway for both lots 2 and 3 in that Block 1, Section 2 of Hardin addition, and we will follow this presentation with the plat, preliminary plat and final plat for Hardin that will include these same stipulations. And we also are requiring landscaping along that northeast border between Creek 27 and this commercial area. It's kind of a landscaping buffer, if you will. Then we're requiring, as part of the development, that in lots 2 and 3, sidewalks would be built along Houston Hart Expressway, and they are to coordinate with TxDOT, because in visiting with TxDOT, they don't know when this area was planned for sidewalks. They want to talk to the applicant about putting sidewalks in along Houston Hart. And then sidewalks would also be required along Melrose. Oops. And so with that, again, staff is recommending with the underlying stipulations and the general commercial use being that use that's allowed. Are there any questions?
I'm just trying to remember when a drainage study, at what point is a drainage study typically requested or required?
The plating stage, and we do have that coming up.
Could you go back to the aerial, please?
Surely. Maybe. Yeah, well, there. We'll keep trying. I think our battery may be going out. She has special gifts.
Special touch.
Yeah, special
That's
gifts.
good.
Thank you.
So generally speaking, I don't like using PDs for zoning because we have zoning guidelines that we're trying to follow. Why can't this just be straight general commercial?
It can be straight general commercial. The only problem that I foresaw was at this point that front section doesn't have a plan for it.
Okay.
And so he may want some flexibility in that front area on what he brings forward. And so we were requiring a PD with general commercial underlying, but allowing for some flexibility in that area, which will probably have to come back to the Planning Commission anyway, but just to indicate that it may be some flexibility needed in that point.
I think the other piece was, this was done as a planned development years ago.
Right.
And so as development has happened, we've carried over that concept of a planned development, which did include some requirements like some landscaping and other things that
What
aren't normally
necessitated the
required.
PD for this site to begin with?
I'm not sure. My guess is it was so long ago that it was just as part of the development of the bluffs that,
Yeah, that was
They
back
wanted-
in 2002, so that give you a feeling.
Okay. You mentioned self-storage units, and we've had self-storage units built on a lot of our major thoroughfares and commercial,
Yes.
prominent commercial sites, like this one. What are the requirements for the improvements that are finished on the frontage of the commercial thoroughfares? Are metal buildings allowed in our
Yes,
commercially zoned lots?
yes.
yes, state law recently changed to, in most cases, prohibit us from regulating building materials on buildings.
Okay,
Some exceptions like historic areas and those kinds of things, but for the most part, in general, new development areas like that, we don't have that ability.
okay. Well, I see this tract, and it's a pretty serious intersection for traffic in and out of the bluffs.
Yes.
And I would be, if I was a resident of the Bluffs, I'd be upset if a big old self-storage unit with metal buildings was put up on the corner and I had to drive by it every day to get to my house.
And that's why he's intending to put the storage units to the back lot
Okay?
that will be developed and keep the
There's not
commercial
a-
on the front.
There's not a rough site plan or anything right now, so we can kind of see where he's intending, because I'm having a hard time visualizing it.
Let
too.
me, if I could for just a moment, I'll move forward to the plat on the right that your final, will be considering for a final plat. That is where the storage units will go, is
Okay.
in that lot.
And you can make that a condition of the plan development. I don't know if that's already in there, Sherry, but you could say that those uses are only allowed on that back portion, not the front portion of the property.
So that entire lot is going to be a storage complex?
So half
No.
of the,
Just the back lot. And general commercial uses on that front lot.
well, back is relative.
I know,
It has
it's-
frontage on Houston Hart.
It does, and that's why we kept it as a PD to require a landscape plan to be part of it, so it buffers.
So the entrance to the storage would be off of Houston Hart or off of Melrose? Okay. And there's no way that we can state that any portion of the building that is fronting a major road has to be of brick or stone or anything like that? I mean, because I'm with you.
Stucco?
Yeah, I'm with you, Travis, because
Something.
the one that's over off of the access road going towards Foster by Bentwood, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a giant metal building.
It is. And it's going to be there for the rest of my lifetime, and I wish there was something I could do about it. I know that there's a need for self-storage units. I just hate that we're using our major, valuable, commercial thoroughfare frontage for these units today. That's, in most markets, self-storage units are kind of tucked away behind some commercial, maybe a buffer between commercial and residential. They're not as prominently visible as they are in our community. And that's, I don't know if I can stop it. I'm just expressing my
Venting.
frustration. So, okay. So do we need to review the plats as part of this process, or?
I wouldn't think so. Again, you do have the ability through a plan development to say certain uses are only allowed on certain parts of the property.
Okay.
As Sherry mentioned, part of the reason for the plan development was to ensure that we could require landscaping, which we normally can't require through our normal zoning ordinance. But that allows us to require some things like fencing and screening so that the view from Houston Heart of those storage units might be, I guess, lessen the negative impact somewhat.
Okay. Does anyone else have thoughts before we open it up for public comment? Anyone else have questions for the staff? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Thank you, Sherry. Anyone wish to speak on this, please come forward, state your name and address or single member district.
Erica Wilde. I don't live in the city limits, and I'm with Carter Fentress Engineering. This particular client has built really nice storage buildings around town already. I want to say that they're halfway bricked. I'll need to go back to my office and check that, but I can send that information to you guys. But these guys do a great job of kind of concealing their property from the rest of, they're doing all that they can. So this property is just in that area that, although metal buildings may not be the best choice, it's a good piece of property for some storage buildings, because with the Creek 27 right next door and serving the surrounding areas. So I just ask that this is approved as presented.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone else want to share their thoughts or make a motion?
I'll move to approve as presented.
Okay.
I really don't have a problem with the storage buildings and being on that one side as well, not on, directly on Melrose, so.
That would need to be added as a condition. I don't think that's one of our recommended conditions, so.
Well, I mean, are we gonna address that in this next one?
Well, the plat is just splitting it into two lots.
Right.
Now is the time if you want to limit the storage buildings to the back lot.
And the client is willing to add that condition.
Okay. Thank you, Erica.
I'll add that condition, having the storage on that back lot.
I'll second, based on the storage being on the back lot.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve, adding a condition that the storage units, if constructed, be placed on the back or northern tract, northern portion of the tract. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0. All right, PP 2301, Lot 2, Hardin Addition. Request for approval of a preliminary plat for vacant land for planned development with an underlying general commercial land use for both storage units and commercial center. The preliminary plat is for the entire 9.088 acre tract located at the intersection of Melrose and Stratford Avenue. Final plat,
Please.
2302, Lot 2, Hardin Addition. Request for approval of Lot 2 being the final plat and Lot 3 being set aside for future commercial development, commercial center development. Lot 2 being 4.614 acres and located at the intersection of Melrose and Stratford.
Okay, as you indicated, this is the final plat and the preliminary plat for the property that we have just been talking about. And again, at this point, they are just final platting the area that is going to contain the storage units. He is marketing or entertaining designs for that front general commercial area, and so is not final platting it at this point. Staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat and final plat for Hardin addition, subject to 7 conditions. So hang with me for just a minute. The first condition is the tax certification requirement. The second one is prior to plat recordation, submit specification and details of construction to prepare and submit sidewalk construction for both lots and for along both Melrose and Houston Hart. And they are also to coordinate with TxDOT on the Houston Hart sidewalk plans. Item 3, condition 3, is to prepare and submit plans for approval of the installation of a water main and required service connections for both the preliminary plat and then the final plat for that section. Item 4 is prepare and submit plans for approval for the sewer main that is required for that area for the preliminary plat and for the final plat on that. Item 5 is to, prior to plat recordation, please note on the plat the following statements. Fire hydrants and fire hydrant department access may be needed to be provided depending on the proposed layout of the buildings and should be addressed as part of the site plan review process. And I think that's the condition you are most familiar with. Item 6 in this case is to provide the drainage study for the area. And then item 7 is to provide a landscaping plan as part of this process and the rezoning that was done before. Are there any questions?
Anyone have questions for the staff?
I have one, just for my own information, on the building line that's noted on the plat, 25 feet from the frontage, is that, how's that determined? Is that? Okay.
That's our standard setback requirement for the underlying zoning in this case.
I don't really have a frame of reference, but it seems like.
And it's measured from the property line, so it's not from the street or the curb, or
Okay.
it's from the front property line.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to understand that.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else have questions? All right, we're going to open it up for public comment.
Erica Wilde, Carter Fentress Engineering. I did want to get a clarification, maybe John, you can help me, for the sidewalks, for the lot fronting Melrose. Can we defer those to building permit or site plan phase? Because if we have to go ahead and put it in as part of the preliminary plat, and then they're going to come in and tear it up when they develop out that lot, so.
Well, typically, and it wouldn't be a requirement of the preliminary plat, but just of the final plat.
Okay, so,
But-
yeah,
and
well, at the
typically,
final.
that's possible to have that deferred to the site plan as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
So, Erica, are you asking us to defer that, or?
No,
Okay.
and I just ask that you approve as presented.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else wish to speak on this case? I'm going to close public comment and take a motion or feedback.
I move to approve as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 6-0, 6-0 for preliminary and final. Item E, PD 2306 Bentwood, Section 45, Riviera Lane. Request to rezone a 9.595 acre piece of property from single-family residential to PD 2306 to allow reduced setbacks and an increase in the maximum floor area ratio from 40 to 60%, allowing for a larger home on a RS1 lot with a base single-family residential zoning district, RS1 for lots 17 through 40, Block 108, Section 45, Bentwood Country Club Estates, located along Riviera Court, south of Clubhouse Lane.
Okay, Zach Rambo, Planning and Development Services. This is an update to case Z2301, heard at your last meeting, and staff's response and working with the applicant to get the desired rezoning as he requested. So the request is to rezone to the PD with a base zoning of the RS1. So that's different than last time of RS3. So it's still RS1, which the surrounding neighborhood is zoned. Reducing the side setbacks from 5 feet, which is typical, to as few as 0, but however, a total of 10 feet for both sides. Increase the maximum floor area ratio from 0.4 to 0.6. This allows for expansion of a house on a, basically making a larger lot on what would typically, or a larger home on a lot than typically would be allowed in the RS1 zoning. And reducing the front setback from 25 to 20 feet. This is in the attempt to accommodate for side entry garages as the applicant mentioned at the last meeting. Again, it is in line with the comprehensive plan, which calls for a mix of housing. I removed the word transition for y'all's sake. It allows for a variation in housing sizes. Same size lots, so there is no request to replat. So it's same size lots, it just allows for a variation in developments, a little more flexibility. Here is the notification map, or the vision map and zoning map. SMD1, Mr. Hebert, Bentwood Country Club, Section 45, as mentioned. It is 9.6 acres. We did receive some in opposition as of this morning. I did not include those. I included copies of comments, similar comments involving reduction of lot sizes, et cetera, property values, similar concerns as expressed as last meeting. Here is the existing plat. Again, request to rezone with an RS1 base, same as the surrounding neighborhoods. Again, I won't go over these again, but minor modifications. Staff is recommending approval. The request meets the criteria necessary to grant. It is in intent of the comprehensive plan as well, providing for flexibility in housing types with a expectation of similar type developments such as the RS1 single family. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the staff? Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
We'll open it up for public comment.
Morning. Jack Paul. I'm building a house on Enclave. My biggest question, I was here last meeting, kind of understand some of it. I just want to make sure I understand all the nomenclature. One of it is the PD 23-06. Basically, is that still an RS1 type deal? What does that actually mean?
So RS1 zoning has minimum setback requirements that include 5 feet on side yards.
Right.
And a 40% floor to area ratio maximum coverage.
I understand all that. What is the
So
PD 23?
what this PD is doing is it's allowing for a 0 lot line side setback on one side, and 10
On the other,
on the other.
right.
A maximum floor area ratio of 0.6, so increasing the density from 0.4 to 0.6. And they also want to reduce the front setback from 25 feet to 20 feet.
So my question on that 25 feet, 20 feet, what is 25 feet to the 20, how does that actually accommodate anything for a side entry garage? You're just going a little bit shorter to make that turn, so why is that even included?
The side entry garage would actually most likely fall under number one, where they're sliding the house over to the side of the lot instead of having a side yard on both sides, essentially. So on our last meeting that you attended, we were under RS3 zoning, which, again, the biggest concern were twin homes, townhomes, all of those, because those fall
Right,
under that zoning.
I understand all that, but I understand the side entry garage. I understand all the, basically you can have 5 feet on each side or 10 feet on one side, 0 on one side. I understand that.
Why reduce the front
Why
setback?
reduce the frontage when you're driving down the side and turning it into a garage? That's not making any
I
difference.
think that's a great question for the applicant.
So, because you're gonna have all these homes sitting back and forth, different lengths.
Right.
That's kind of not the concept of the development.
Yes, sir.
So
From my
that was one of my other
understanding-
questions.
I
Okay.
thought that when we, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe from the last meeting when we talked about moving it from 25 to the 20, because the floor area ratio of what the house footprint would be on the lot, since that was increasing, it was allowing a little bit more of the
So
backyard.
basically, you're talking about making the house bigger to get that 20 feet.
So basically, because it's allowing a larger home on the footprint of the lot, bringing the home slightly further would allow a larger backyard, so then the houses on Enclave,
I understand
they
that.
wouldn't be right on top of the fence, essentially.
What's the rear setback?
20 feet.
Okay?
That's
Is it
not
20
changing.
feet in both RS3 and RS1?
I believe it's, yes.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, that's
Could we,
to get a
could we
big
consider adjusting the rear setback to 15 feet instead of the front to 20?
I think staff wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that.
Okay.
But you are correct, Commissioner David. It is to allow for that.
Okay, well, you answered all my questions. I understand it all. I just want to make sure now, how's it going to get, I guess, how's it going to get presented to where it doesn't change or anything? This is what we're going to be at, you know what I mean? Or is this the way it's going to read? When you make your motion, this will be how it will. There'll be no more changes.
That's correct.
We all go
No
to
more
bed
changes.
tonight and feel
Yes, sir.
secure and everything like that.
Yes, sir.
This would be it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
My last thing would be, you guys do a good job and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
showing up.
Just because not all the public understands our processes, I just want to make clear that this will be your decision. City council could change it in some ways.
Yeah, and that is an important point to make for everyone in the room. We are an advisor to the city council on matters like this. The city council has the ultimate authority for approving anything that comes out of the planning commission like this. So we would make a vote and it would go to city council. They would have to read and adopt what we've proposed doing for these lots.
Ricky Templin, single member, District 6.
Yes, sir.
My question is how do you prevent in the future from happening? What I've seen with this is one house will be built on the 0 lot line side. You have 10 different builders buy 10 different lots. And then one house be built 5 feet from each side. And when you get to the middle of the block, you have 2 houses that are both on a 0 lot line side. And you tell the guy in the middle, well, you got to build 10 feet from each side. And so without this being on the plat and being a requirement, I don't know how the permit department can enforce that until they're all built.
Okay? Thank you.
I'm Mark Goodwin, 5317 Enclave.
Yes, sir.
And the only question, or only concerns I have on this is the 25-foot, when you're driving down the road, one
Yep.
house is here, one house is here, one here, one here, one here.
Yes, sir.
The second concern is, they say the 5 foot or the 0 foot from the property line. Now, does that include the eave of the house coming down, or is it where the brick ledge is? Because sometimes it says 5 foot, and you have a foot closer to the property line with the house roof coming down, and now then you've got closer than your 5 foot, and fire hazards for fire jumping from one house to the next to the next.
Yes, sir.
That's a concern I had.
I
Not that
understand.
I'm opposed to it, but it's just a concern I wanted to put out there.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Very good point.
We get the staff to
It
answer
does
that.
not allow for an overhang on a 0-foot lot line. You cannot overhang onto someone else's property.
Okay, thank you.
One other piece that, for those zero lot line houses, our ordinance does require, I think we call it a maintenance easement. So, in other words, if you build your house right on the property line, to paint or to fix your gutters or anything like that, you're gonna have to actually trespass on your neighbor's property to do that. So that's why we require typically a 5 or 10 foot access easement so that I can maintain my own house.
Yes, sir.
By going onto my neighbor's property.
Okay.
And so that would have to be addressed as well during
Thank you.
permitting.
Got it.
Hi, Julia Antley, SMD1, and I'm here to publicly express my support of this plan development. As a property owner, I feel much more comfortable with this plan development than the proposed zoning change that we heard at the last meeting. And so I genuinely believe that given the existing plats, this is the best possible compromise and outcome that we could have come up with. So I just wanted to take this chance to publicly thank the Planning Commission, staff, and Kevin and Russell for helping us reach this point. And again, just want to express my support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else wish to speak?
Russell with SKG. On the overhang question, typically, when you have the zero lot lines, you will go and dedicate a 2-foot overhang easement and then a 4-foot maintenance easement on the adjacent property so that that property owner will have the right to overhang their eave and then go and perform maintenance along the side of their structure. So that's really nothing new. It's done whenever zero lot line zoning is done. So we'll work with Bentwood and we'll establish, okay, and the builder that's building those, which is going to be the zero side, and on the neighboring property, they will establish those overhang and maintenance easements to afford that, so there are no issues with that. So that's easily addressed. The 20-foot versus 25-foot, it's all in an effort to be able to build effectively larger homes without reducing the backyards. You know, we have people talking that live on enclave, so last time they were saying they wanted to keep and make sure they had larger backyards, so that's what we're trying to do is make sure they get to have their larger backyards by moving the homes 5 feet forward. So I would think the people would be appreciative, if you will, of that, of not trying to encroach into squeezing in the backyard, but we're moving them forward on a street that they don't live on. And yes, coving or homes setting in and out, I find that personally appealing, you know, so where do we, you know, even if you do a 25-foot setback, people could set back at 30 or 35 if they wanted to. So the setback and undulation is to some people maybe aesthetically pleasing and more of a benefit or not. So I don't see the detraction from allowing the 20 feet because it allows people that opportunity, if you will, based on the footprint of their home, to meet and be within what is stated by this PD. So be happy to answer any questions, and thanks to staff and you guys for hearing us through this.
I have a question for you, Russell. On one of the residents raised it was Rocky that raised the concern about having some that were 5-foot sides and zeros and 10s. How does this subdivision get built where there's 10 feet between all of the houses and we don't have, you know, in between lots that are 5 on each side and create problems?
Well, and one builder is buying a majority of these lots, so that one builder will make sure that they don't. But setting those maintenance easements will kind of control that. Now, we're an imperfect people. You know, mistakes have been made. Houses have been built on the wrong lot. You know, People have built over building setbacks. So all of this stuff happens. We all know that, and we all deal with it when it does happen. Now, Bentwood and the builder will make those efforts to do the best that we can to protect against that. It happens, trust me, we all know, but in this case, maybe we're paying a little closer attention to it because we are more aware of it. It seems like a lot of times people get complacent and happy and just off going and not paying attention to stuff. But in this case, when it's really kind of brought forth and you got to be careful about those types of conditions that they make sure they are protected against occurring.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for Russell? Thank you. All right.
Like I said, Kevin Collins from Bentwood Estates. Like I said last meeting, these are deed restricted, and all of them will be required to be on the zero. So there won't be any of the in my particular situation because of the deed restrictions that will be in place. So there won't be. I understand Rocky's point, maybe for other subdivisions, but it wouldn't work. It wouldn't happen in ours. Also, just another quick point: if you look at where we're doing this, there's actually 2 tracks at the end. Between section 44 and 45 that are drainage basic tracks, so there's no way that there would be any like 5s next to zeros. It'd be zeros, and then there's a space, and then the others start. So there's not an option for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so let's keep this real simple. First of all, talking about builders are going to do whatever they want. I understand that. I've built a lot of homes. But why don't we just set this thing, everything 20 and 0 lot line, or 10 to one side and 0 on one side? I mean, why don't we make it just that simple to where there can't be any forwards and backs, ups and downs, or whatever you want to call it?
Yes, sir.
And just pass this thing that way.
I think we could.
The spirit of the ordinance is minimums,
Yes.
a minimum setback. And that's what everybody in the city does. I don't know that any city says you must build exactly on this line at this point. I don't know that any homeowner or builder would necessarily want that regulation of you got to build right here. That's not the intent. The intent is to provide and have a minimum separation or a minimum setback. Give people the opportunity to set back. Hey, I want my home to set back a little extra. Let's not make them all be at one point. If the builder wants to, they should be able to. It'd be like saying every home has to have this exact same pitch and this color roof and this type of brick. That's not what we're about. We're about a little variety here. So, the spirit of the ordinance, we thought we were coming with a very simple, clean PD. Talked about setbacks, the FAR, and the building setback. We thought we kept it about as simple as you could keep it. So we don't want to make it complicated. We wanted to keep it simple. So thank you very much.
Russell, would it be possible, do you guys know which sides are going to be the zeros? And could that be, if we could add that as an exhibit before this goes to council, then everybody would know.
We've already established. In fact, we had all that set up before we realized that we had it zoned wrong. I mean, so that's already been established with the.
So yes, we'll get that presented to staff before it goes to council.
And then the commission.
Yeah, there's the builder. There's
Box Construction owns 25 of them.
Box, and then we have another contract that's a large group.
That's not relevant to what is being, it doesn't matter who builds the homes. Honestly, that's not what we're talking about.
I think if they know which sides are going to be the zeros, I think if you all make as part of your motion that they provide that and that get adopted at the city council approval, then that clarifies that.
Yeah, we can provide you. We established all the zero sides because that's part of the way that you do it to make it all stay the same. So we put the zero side is established on all lots so that they will all be in line. So there's not any of that.
Thank you. All right, anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Obviously, this is the whole conversation that we're having about this tract is to correct an oversight that was made by the property owner. And I think that this solution, by and large, is pretty fair. The only concern that I have, and it was raised by one of the residents, is the front setback. And I understand Mr. Gully's point about a property owner having the right to move their home further back. But when we're dealing with lots that are this size and we're trying to get as much square footage of a house as we can on the lots, that minimum setback is going to be where the house is located. So I guess the question to this commission is, do you guys think that it matters if was it about, can you go back to the overview of the subdivision? Shows the lots. Yes. So, I mean, it looks like we're kind of mid-block on the south side where these lots come in. I mean, I'm not saying to take the 5 feet away and not give you guys the square footage on the back. I just think that it might look better and more consistent in complementing the other improvements in this area to have them at 25 feet if everything else is. So, just a thought. Anyone else want to share their thoughts?
You know, I agree with Kevin that, I mean, when you look at the two outer edges and you have that easement, I think that easement is large enough, because I live there. I mean, that's my area. When you pass an easement, it really changes the aesthetics.
Kind of resets the.
And you really, it's not like they're side by side.
Right.
You actually take a break and then it looks normal. So, from my point of view, it's, the way that it was presented, I think the residents and I think a lot of the folks have expressed a thank you for, the work that the staff did, and I'm okay with it because of the way it was outlined.
Okay.
I agree, and I honestly believe that having the ability to have that 20-foot setback in the front really does alleviate some of the pressure on the fence lines in the back. Most people don't spend time in their front yard like they do in their backyard, so I think that they would want a little bit more of a buffer. So I believe that we've come up with a really great solution, and I'm good with moving forward.
I'm with you.
Anyone else? All right, anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve it as presented.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. Just to clarify, I think Mr. Collins has offered to show which lots, where the zero line is on the lots in this subdivision, which we very much appreciate. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's 6-0. Thank you, guys. Conditional uses, CU 2304, 3221 Red Bluff Road, West. A request for approval of a conditional use to allow short-term rental in the single-family residential zoning district located at 3221 Red Bluff Road West.
Hello, Ray Lineberry again, and I'm closing us out with the final project or case. This is a request for a short-term rental. It is RS1 zoning. It's District 1, Tommy Hebert, and it's the Nasworthy neighborhood. You have the picture of the house front that shows they do have paved 2 parking spaces, and then north and south view of the street that it's on. I'm going to go back one more. So if you notice that the street pictures are for right here as a public access road. There was 12 notices mailed, 0 in favor was received, and we did receive 1 in opposition. I believe the letter was in the staff report.
Yes.
And there's no changes to existing structures or anything. It has adequate parking. There's not another short-term rental active within 500 feet that city is aware of. I'm going to stress that because in the opposition, the neighbor mentions a short-term rental, the city is not aware of that. So the rental is in the RS1 single-family zoning. There's no foreseen adverse effects. The short-term rental will address a need for rentals in the Nasworthy area, and it is a neighborhood, so it does not impact any type of things. So staff is recommending approval with the 3 conditions: that they maintain the parking, they get a certificate of occupancy from the Permits and Inspection Division, and they obtain and comply with a fire inspection. And since this is the first approval, the property owner will need to come back in a year for renewal, and then it's every 2 years after that, and provide proof of hotel tax. And that is it, if you have any questions.
Any questions for Ray? Thank you. I open it up for public comment.
I don't know whether all of y'all got a list of my response or not to this, but my name is Donna Ferguson. I live at 3217 Red Bluff Road West. My house is next door to the one making the request for the change. And I have lived at my house, in my home, for nearly 23 years. And a good number of those years, there was a short-term rental on the other side of me. And during the time that that rental existed, I had experienced from some of the renters, because some of them were good, but some of the renters were disrespectful to personal property and to the residents. Sometimes they needed more than 4 spaces when they were having large gatherings. They generate a lot of trash, even if it's just the normal people without the gatherings. They can be very loud when they are, especially when alcohol is involved. They have a tendency to cross over into the neighbors' yards and docks, resulting in possible theft or injury. They don't control their children or leash their pets. And now these are some: disregard speed limits with both watercraft by not adhering to a no-wake zone that exists out in front of our residents, and potentially damaging the docks and endangering people and domestic pets and wildlife, because they drive fast too when they come up in there. The trash is picked up once a week on Tuesdays in the area, and I have seen that on most occasions the receptacles provided are not enough to take care of the trash that's been generated by the renters. The trash spillover sometimes is left on the ground in bags, sometimes not in bags. So that leaves it up to the residents to pick up the trash when the animals have gotten into it or the wind's blown, like we've experienced some recently. The narrow paved road that connects the 8 houses in the area, it's not wide enough to handle the extra traffic, because their large gatherings can, according to the code, have up to 20 people. And that's going to have more people parking in that area, of course. It really functions more like an alley or a private driveway right now to the residents that live there. I think you, if I heard right, you thought it met the conditions, but that was a question that I had. When the roads are maintained out there, they don't come up in that little bit of the area. So in fact, there's not a true turnaround in it even, and the road it dead ends into one of the residents' driveway, and then 2 of the other residents just are right there, all connected to it. Your map even shows where there's a little bit of a jog off of the designated street that goes up into it. But out there where we're at, it's very up close and personal. It's open boundaries because there's not a lot of fencing that goes all the way down to the lake. It's pretty peaceful and quiet. The neighbors all look out for themselves, and the road itself, when there's a lot of traffic, if Republic comes to get the trash or the postal people bring the mail, if there's a lot of cars there, they won't even come up in there. Or if they do, they'll back out and go on. And then, of course, that certainly hinders the emergency vehicles if they should have to get up in there with that much traffic involved. It's just not conducive to a short-term rental. So that was probably my vote up there.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Anyone else wish to speak?
My name's Mark Priest. I live at 3102 up in that cul-de-sac. I think that's what makes this uniquely different as a cul-de-sac, because the conditions for the parking just don't apply out there, guys. You know, we've been through it with a house that existed for, a year and a half, I suppose. And the policies and whatnot set up through the planning, as well as the permit itself, right, has to be approved by the city. Do I understand that right?
Yes, sir.
None of that applies when people get out there, because the thing that is different is it becomes a party house. It's at the lake. We've all rented houses from VRBO and had great times. I have no complaints. I mean, even as me going to places, our experience, and to me, that's what makes this different. We already know what happens because we've already lived it. And that's why we feel the way we do about this. The conditions and whatnot are good, the parking, but in a cul-de-sac, even if they had 3 cars come and visit, you know, they violated the rules. So as we understand it, when the rule gets violated, what do? Do we call the police? How do we go through a way of documenting time and time and time again that this has happened to us?
I think that's a very good question. And it's a question that I hope the staff can answer, but when we adopted the rules that establish these short-term rentals in neighborhoods, we were mindful of the concerns that neighbors would have. And code compliance and the police department are the 2 avenues that are available for all residents to file complaints against short-term rentals that are causing problems. There's talk about a 1-year permit process. So at the end of 12 months, when this comes back up for review, if we were to move forward today, the staff would pull the complaints that were filed with code compliance and with the city police department and the fire department if there was an issue there. And that would be discussed and considered for the renewal process of that short-term rental. So the idea is that if there's a house that's not mindful of the neighbors and allowing folks to come in and have keg parties and raise hell and cause damage to neighbors, we will hopefully get some sort of documentation that we can discuss in our meeting and say, you know, you were given a chance, you had 12 months, and it didn't work out for you guys. There were too many
With the
problems.
others that have come back to you a year later, have most of them been approved a year later?
We haven't had issues with the short-term rentals that we've approved.
Right.
But that's not to say that, you know, the other issue that we've got, and you know, you talk about having a short-term rental in this area, and the city says there are none. I'm of the opinion, and we've discussed this in the past, that there are a number of short-term rentals that are operating in our market that are not permitted.
Really?
And we've asked the staff to try to identify and address those. There's obviously Airbnb and VRBO are websites where folks can market these properties for rent.
You know, even personally, as an Airbnb, where you as an owner or on-site on the property, makes all the difference in the world. Changes
Sure.
it completely.
Sure.
At the lake, though, we have such unique circumstances. Our experience with fifth wheels in the front yard, 27 cars in the cul-de-sac.
It's a problem.
We all have pictures of it.
Right.
So you can kind of understand why we're standing up here feeling pretty strong, because we already got a track record to know what it's like to live next door to one.
I
So we
served
feel
on
pretty strongly about it.
I understand. I served on the planning commission when we had this discussion about allowing short-term rentals.
No doubt. You guys
And
went through a whole lot of
And
time.
I remember the photographs that were presented in those meetings of keg parties out at the lake at some of these properties that were, major concerns. And that's why we adopted these requirements, these checkpoints, having a fire marshal inspection. The standards that we've set for short-term rentals exceed what a property owner would have to do to rent a property to someone long-term, more than 30 days. They don't have to have a permit to do that. They don't have to have a fire marshal inspection to do that. If you have a short-term rental, you have to have both. The challenge, I think, is getting the city staff to help identify the properties that are operating as short-term rentals that don't have permits, and force them to come in to obtain a permit so that they can follow the same rules and guidelines that everyone else is trying to follow in our community, or stop doing that altogether.
So we as residents, let's say we have a Saturday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock and there's 14 cars in the cul-de-sac, 2 in my driveway. Do we call the police?
Yes.
Then what?
I would, and I would take photographs and videos and document what's occurring.
Is there a complaint we can file with the city as well? Oh, see, no, I wasn't aware of that, because we as a group have already talked. We're gonna be a pretty tight group.
Sure.
Because we have been abused over and over and over again.
And I understand.
I would like to speak towards the residents, just as a, like Travis said, a safeguard is, a year. We'll check into these complaints that you guys have made, code compliance and police. The other thing I want to mention, this particular house, just so you know, this applicant has been working very much with the city, and it is a group of guys that are making it very safe. They're very aware of the area, the lake, how small it is, and they are a really good group of guys that are trying very hard to do this.
Who are they?
I know one of them is a realtor, and they work with a construction company.
Okay.
That type of thing. And the reason I say this is because I know they're working with the fire department to put stuff in there that they get contacted when stuff happens within the house, that type of stuff. So it's a really good group with this particular one.
Do they have a past experience in running short-term STRs?
That I don't know. But they do have those safeguards in place for you guys to be able to call and give us this information. And the other thing I want to remind you is, now that they have come forward, and if this gets approved, another short-term rental cannot go in within 500 feet legally. Not to say there's not one illegally, but that does kind of put a lock on it.
Another note too, sir, one of the applicants did call me. He is an active realtor, very well known in the community, very, very nice person, and he asked me some specific guidelines. And one of my suggestions to him, because your street is so tightly knit and very narrow, as far as like with the layout of that street coming in, to actually go and introduce himself to all the residents, provide his phone number. That way, if you did have an issue, you could actually get in direct contact. So that was something that
I think that's very important.
He
because
would work on.
If any of you guys lived in a cul-de-sac, you'd know just what I'm talking about.
Yes,
It's
sir.
not like living on a street. I know you really well. I know the kids. I go pick the kids up from school because you're someplace else. Otherwise, and Most of our neighborhoods, we have alleys, and you come and go from the back of your house, and we don't. We
Yeah.
wave in the morning. And all these things come into play, and what just shows up in my mind is the abuse that we got. Oh, it was really bad. And so whether you approve or you disapprove, from here it would go to the city council, right?
Yes, sir.
So then
No.
we're gonna come back again and.
No.
and-
No, not
No?
sure.
No,
No.
no, once they
So
reach.
this is it.
This is it. For conditional use, if they approve it, then it's up to the applicants they have to go through a building inspection, a fire inspection. They have to provide all sorts of floor plans and what it looks like, and
They also have to pay hotel occupancy tax.
they have to pay hotel
So is there things like the
occupancy.
house that was next door to us? It was a 3-bedroom house, sleeps 12.
Yeah, no.
What it was is they put a bunch of bunk beds in.
Sure.
Yeah, no.
Right? Is
That
that
is one
allowed
thing-
with the current?
No. With building, you're allowed, is it 6 people that are non-related, or that are related, right? Is it non-related?
Per
4 or 6?
bedroom?
No, total.
Total.
Like,
No, house.
so I think it's based on the
Unrelated.
bedroom amount. I can't remember the number either.
Yeah, I think
But
it's
it
either
does
4
have
or
a.
Trying.
I hear you.
It does
I hear ya.
have a cap on the amount of occupants that can be occupying the home. And again, so Aaron, and I actually found this out because my partner in business does Airbnbs outside of town. But basically on any of those sites, VRBO, Airbnb, all of those, as guests rate your property and rate you, it drops you up and down a scale. So it's in the owner's best interest to make sure it's a phenomenal experience, they don't get those complaints, and that they're doing their best to keep that a very solid rental so they can actually produce income. Otherwise, as soon as they drop down the ranks, then they're not getting the rentals that they typically would. So I've learned a little bit more about the back behind the scenes.
Reputation is very important.
Yeah.
Very
Information.
important in the
So,
industry.
and again, as I mentioned, the gentleman that contacted me, he plans on coming to visit the residents, providing contact information for the gentleman. I don't know who the partners are, but that was my biggest suggestion, just because I know how tightly knit that little community is out there.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
Thank you.
So, real quick, and you may have explained it, I just realized it. What is this, the 29698? This, the L-shaped, is that
Is that I think it's an easement,
a piece
isn't
of
it?
property?
The city owns it. That
A little
long,
boomerang
like,
shape there.
no, it goes like this,
To the
like.
left.
It's got the
To
driveway.
No.
No,
It's
it's
the
the
easement.
road.
It's the easement and the road, yeah.
So is that,
So it's a public access road
Okay.
off of that. It's city-owned.
so even the people up along Red Bluff West, that is city-owned that they have to cross to get to their property, correct?
This right here is
No.
Red
But
Bluff.
see, right-
Yeah, but-
Right.
And so,
But I mean,
so this
see
down
it-
here is the public.
But see, it goes to the left. See what I'm
Yes, there are a
saying?
few
Yes.
areas at the lake like that where
Okay, I'm
there's,
just making sure I'm.
there's
thinking
intervening city property
Right.
between the actual road and their property.
property. Okay, cool. I'm just making sure I'm seeing everything correct.
Yes, sir.
I'm Daniel Gossett, 3225 Red Bluff Road West. I've lived there 15 years, raised my kids there. This situation is very frustrating. I may not be able to do anything about it, like you said, but I'm going to voice my frustration. I've had multiple instances, and some people heard me the first time I talked about this, and here we go again. So I would appreciate for you to decline it. I didn't send this in because I was going to show up. I rarely say anything. I'm not the Karen of the neighborhood. If you got a problem, I'm going to take it to you personally. And anytime I've taken anything personally to anybody, a situation like this with the STR, it never is good. You tell me to call the cops over what? Some parking? I'm going to tell them, go move your car. Okay? I've had them in my front yard stealing my firewood, and I tell them, hey man, that's my firewood. I thought this was for everybody. I've got multiple instances like this. Me and my daughters walk out the back door. We're going to go fishing. They're on my dock, fishing off my dock with my rod and reels that we had earlier that day. They said, what are you going to do about it? So you say it's that easy. It's not. Have one next door to you and you'll change your mind quickly. Because all this, and then I'm on the phone all the time. I leave town for a volleyball trip over the weekend. What am I going to come home to? Who's protecting my property? You know, are you guys going to come protect my property? If it's a great idea,
come hang out a bit, you'll decide real quick it is not a great idea. I'd rather have a welding shop next to me than a STR. At least I know what I'm getting into. Welding dudes, man, we can hang out. Those guys that come over, zero respect for me, my teenage daughters, or my property. So I would assure you, approving this is a bad idea for our tight-knit neighborhood. You say it's a bunch of good guys. I know some of them. That's fine. Great guys. No one has approached us yet. I'm at a city council, our city planning meeting. No one's approached me personally yet. And I know one of them. So if we're so personal and great guys, where are they? That's what I'm talking about. It's always after the fact. We're going to sell it and then worry about it later. I am on the other end of that. I got to think of my family, my daughters, my wife. When I'm gone, what am I leaving them to? So neighbors is one thing. People that live there and have to be accountable. But an STR, I don't live next door to a hotel. But we are going to do that again. And we've already done it. If I didn't live it, breathe it, need it for that long, I would not be this heated and upset about it. But I'm very upset that we're going to do this again. And the garage out front is a converted garage. Are they going to convert it back to a garage, or is that more sleeping area? We sleep in 20 there. What are we doing? Is it 6 max? And then it's like, no, we're going to change it. We're already like, what is it? That's the thing. We're going to change it accordingly after this gets approved until they beat us over the head with it. So I agree with them 100%. That, yes, if you lived on my block, you would be dead set against this. You would be up here saying, no way, no how. There's not one person on that block that has lived there during that would agree that this is a good idea for someone to make some money.
So you've talked about having these units near you. Where are there short-term rentals?
The short-term rental was at, what's your neighbor's address? 3213, which got bought. That was like the most pleasant thing ever. Now I have a neighbor. He's awesome. Him and his wife, great people, stick to themselves. You know, I need something, I want to help them with, cut down some trees, whatever we need to do. But destroying property is another thing, and that's what we have with the short-term rental.
So the particular home that we're discussing right now, in this case, was for sale for a very, very long time. I believe it was also a rental at one point. Was that the renter that was disrupting your property?
No, that was 2 houses down. Now it's going to be right next door to me. Okay. And our houses are together. So there is no leadway. So I have been to hearings. The only other time I've been to a hearing is over this same yellow house, over that garage, and they built on my property, and it was a big mess. And I voiced my opinion then about the STR and about the situation. It's like, well, the city says we're going to do this and this, but nothing happens. That took years for them to take care of that. And I didn't even care. I just came to the hearing because it was a big mess. And I got a letter like this, so I'm here. So I don't like to come to these. I'm supposed to be doing payroll. I got something to do. But I'm here at this because I'm that positive that the same thing is going to happen. Because I lived it. So I appreciate your time.
There's no fence going down between your property and the current home?
Oh, there's a fence.
I know it's like 4
They're modifying it. They're doing something to it. I'm sure hopefully they rebuild it. I don't know what they're doing. Nobody's talked to me about it.
Okay.
So I know the house sat vacant for a while. Asking price, that's not my concern.
No,
like if they wanted to sell it, drop the price, they would have sold it a year before that.
Right.
I heard that she was very hard to deal with. That's not my concern either. My concern is my teenage daughters, my wife, my property, and what I have to worry about. So it's all about me, I guess. So anyway, so like I said, I'd rather have a welding shop next door. Amen for that. I know those guys. Any other questions for me?
No, thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am.
You're talking about the house and the conditions they have to meet and the people who own the house.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree. I haven't met them. My neighbors have. I think they're probably very good people and they have good intentions. But when renters come in short term for a weekend or a few days, they're there to have fun. They're there because they want to get away from their usual rules and regulations, and they like to be loud, And this is even the good ones I really didn't have a lot of trouble with. I was always asking somebody to please turn down their music. You talk about close, we're on that 5-foot lot line that y'all talked about. So, you know, and the lake has fencing regulations. You can't have a privacy fence closer than 75 feet from the lake.
Right.
So it's all open. There's a lot of open fencing or property boundary lines down through there. And they do. They forget the rules. And they probably are very nice people at home too, but they do things there when they're on vacation that they don't do when they're at home and when they're in their own neighborhood. So it's disrupting the whole neighborhood when it's like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, anyone else wish to speak? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Man, I understand the frustration. I can only speak from what's been done since we passed this ordinance. And I think that what we've done has made a resoundingly positive impact on having short-term rentals. We don't have a lot of properties coming back to renew that have been problems. I can't think of one where we've had someone come in to renew that had issues with the city, whether it's the police department or code compliance. And we haven't had folks coming in to renew with a bunch of angry residents saying, we're having problems with this house. The biggest problem I see is that we have a bunch of properties that are operating as short-term rentals that aren't registered. And I think we've got to do a better job of identifying those properties and bringing them in to obtain permits and have them meet the standards of compliance and pay tax. That's why we set it up like this. So, okay. Anyone else have thoughts or wish to make a motion?
This reminds me a lot of the case we heard either last month or month before on Beatty, just being a very tight-knit little community, not a lot of residents on the street. The parking was a question on that one as well. You know, so I don't know if there's something that you can, I can't remember how that one went as far as the owner themselves was present and said that they would restrict like boats and vehicles and whatnot, but I don't think that was set in the stipulations that we did, correct? Okay. So very, very similar situation because I believe there was only about 8 homes on that block. That's all I had.
Yeah, that's the biggest concern I have with this one is the width of the access to the property and the realistic availability of parking.
Yeah, and I think the one that you mentioned on Beatty had a lot less.
Yes, the
So
street was
remember the
narrower, it had a
restriction
lot of tree coverage. I mean, it was much harder to get into Beatty than it was.
That one was very tough, remember? It was just,
And also noteworthy that the applicant was here.
yes, they were here.
So what are if we determine to not move forward with this permit, how long until they can reapply?
That's a good question. We might have to research that. For a normal zoning case, it's 12 months that they would have to wait to come back. Off the top of my head, I don't know if that applies to conditional use or not.
Okay. How about this? I know the typical standard is 12 months that the applicant has to prove themselves. Because of the concern of the neighbors, is it something that we could do like a 3 to 6 month trial on this one and just see? I mean, I know we haven't done that in the past, but I don't see why that couldn't be a possibility.
Be against the ordinance that's approved by them. I think that would be, that the council's already approved that 1 year.
Right.
So they would have, I don't
just
know
didn't
that we can go
if we could
against
just put
that,
an
yeah.
overlay on it, like as a condition.
Generally, you do have the ability to place additional conditions
Right.
on a conditional use. That's part of the purpose. Given that those timeframes are established by ordinance, I'm not sure if you could do something quicker. The other issue I would point out, and I don't, these guys may be well ahead of the curve, but one of the things we've seen from a few of these short-term rentals is their 1 year comes due. And in some cases, they haven't even opened yet because they're still getting the fire marshal's approval. They're still getting all their inspections. And if they have to do any remodeling to meet some of those standards. So that would be a concern if you made it as short as 3 months or even 6 months.
Okay, that makes
They might
sense.
not have a track record by that point that's very long.
Okay.
I'll point out one more thing. The ordinance does allow revocation of a conditional use. We don't really have a process for that. So at what point you would ask to bring something back, we don't really have, that hasn't been an issue. I don't know that we've ever done that since I've been here, but you would have the ability to revoke a conditional use, perhaps earlier than the 12 months if it became a substantial problem. But again, we don't really have a mechanism to start the ball rolling on that at this point.
Okay.
Thanks. Well, just based on, again, trying to keep everything at an even level playing field and you just utilizing Beatty as an example, I appreciate the residents' concerns on this. But I feel like if we pass Beatty and this isn't allowed, then I feel like we're almost setting a double standard in a very similar situation. So I am going to make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Oh, sorry, aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Show of hands on that one.
So in favor? 3. Opposed? 3.
Right, so that failed to receive a majority vote, so then it is denied. This, as we mentioned earlier, the commission is the final decision. However, the ordinance does allow the applicant to appeal this to the city council, given that you all denied it.
Okay. Thank you. Public comment, issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais. Begin by stating their name and address or single member district. Please limit all remarks to less than 3 minutes. I'm going to open public comment. Anyone wish to speak?
Real quick thing, Russell Gully, 5001 Pecan Ridge Drive. It makes me start thinking about this short-term rental. If I don't want one in my neighborhood, I may need to go apply and get a short-term rental in my home with absolutely no intention of ever being a short-term rental. So something somebody might think about doing, applying for a short-term rental to keep them at least 500 feet away from you. So just thinking.
Just a thought. It's a good thought.
Aggie brain at work.
All right, anyone else wish to speak? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Director's report.
I don't have anything to add.
All right, thank you, John. Future meeting agenda and announcements. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, April 17th in the East Mezzanine, City Hall, 72 West College Avenue, San Angelo. An adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?